My name is Jennifer Boresz Engelking, and I recently wrote my first book. It is called Hidden History of Lake County, Ohio.
Now, why did you want to write about the nooks and crannies of Lake County?
So I grew up in Willowick, and I grew up hearing about bits and pieces about the Griffith, that there was a big shipwreck. And this is in the area that I visited often at Lakefront Lodge. And, it just gets your imagination going as a kid to think about everything that happened. And then I also heard about Willow Beach. So both of these big historical events were in the same area and about a half a mile away from where I grew up. And it just always stuck with me. And I've always loved kind of like the story behind the story. When I was reporting, I always loved doing the human interest pieces. And so it just was something that I wanted to, for myself, find out more about. But then it's great to be able to share it with everybody else.
Now, you mentioned Willow Beach. Could you please explain to those who are not initiated, what is a car coaster?
Willow Beach was an amusement park that existed in the early 1900s, and it was across from present-day Shoregate Shopping Center. And they had a baseball team, they had a dance pavilion, they had, of course, beaches where there are now cliffs, and they had a ride that was a car coaster. It wasn't a roller coaster, it was a car coaster, although it looks like a roller coaster. And riders would take their car and they would drive it up, and then they would coast down, and it was going down into a ravine that was right along the lake. And it's pretty amazing. I have a picture in my book of this car coaster, and it's amazing to think when you see it, because it doesn't look like a really solid structure. So perhaps they had different safety standards at the time, but people must have had fun on it because it was there for a while.
Were I a more thorough journalist, I would have B-roll cutting to the car coaster. But no, if you want to see what a car coaster looks like, you go get Hidden Histories of Lake County.
Absolutely.
Now, where do you go to research hidden history?
So researching hidden history is a combination of reading as many books as I could about the history that exists, and then trying to find old newspaper articles, then actually going to the physical places. For hidden history, many of these places still exist in some form. And I would approach whoever is there now and say, what do you know about the building or the story or the people behind it? And in some cases, I was able to even talk to descendants of some of the people who were connected to it. So I have letters that were shared with me, and just stories that have been passed down. And some stories, of course, you can't necessarily confirm, you can't find the backup. And then I would say that according to the story, but yeah, it was just a combination of a lot of different forms of research.
That sounds like a time-consuming process.
Yeah, it was. And my daughter was 1 at the time. So I had a lot of help from family while I was researching, but it did take a lot of time. And I started out really researching a lot before I started writing to get an idea of what I wanted to include. But then there was also a lot of research as I was writing and learning new things.
Now, you have written and co-written several documentaries as well.
Mm-hmm.
How does researching a documentary differ from researching a book? Does it differ?
Yes and no. I would say because the documentaries, you're relying on what you're showing. You have to show something. So there is, to me, I feel like maybe there's a little more flexibility in what you can include in a book, because you can find a random fact and you can just write it in. If you're making a documentary, you really need to have someone who is saying it on camera, or you need to have something like a photo or something that matches up with it, so that you're telling the story, but you're showing it first. And in a book, you do have photos, but it's kind of the opposite. You're telling the story with a little bit of backup from photos.
Now, you talk about the visual aspect. I was going to say that some of the photos in your book are magnificent.
I
love the photo of the Fairport Harbor mayor after the bootlegging.
I love that,
raid.
yes.
And where do you find these pictures?
Some of the photos I've gotten from local historical societies. Willow Beach Historical Society actually provided the photo on the cover. And then Jim Dudash, who is local in Menor, he colorized it. And then some of them are just from individuals who have them, who've had them passed down in their family. Some have been taken from local photographers. And then Cleveland State University has a really great archive of historical photos, and many of them are from Cleveland State.
Do you have a favorite story in Hidden Histories?
It's hard to choose a favorite because really, this was my first book and I was really excited to write it and to find out all this information. So I really overwrote it in some ways. When it came down to making sure I was within the limit, I was not. So I had to pick and choose. And so the stories that are in it are really stories that I care about and I think are really interesting and that other people will think are interesting. But of course, because for me, some of the stories early on that inspired me were the Griffith and Willow Beach. So as someone who's always been interested in them since I was a kid, it was fun to find more details about them.
For those who love hidden history and want to know what's next, what's next?
So my next book is going to be Lost Lake County, and that will focus on more unknown stories about Lake County, but on places that no longer exist.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Menor Public Library makes an appearance in Hidden History, right?
Yes. I love the story of the first subscription library in the Western Reserve, which is also the first library in Menor. And it is on 615 on Center Street, and you recognize it as Confectionery Cupboard. And yeah, it's just got a really interesting story. In my book, I include some of the social activities they used to have there. They would have spelling bees, and they did a social night. I think it was called 1 pound grab bag. And so people would bring a bag, a paper bag, and they would either put food in it or they would put clothes. And everyone would take a turn choosing a bag. And if they had food, they had to eat it. They had to eat it right then. And if it had clothes, then they would go somewhere and change their clothes. And this was one of the social events that took place in this library. So it wasn't just about getting books. It was really a centerpiece for the whole community.
Okay. I worked here 8 years. I'm down the street from Garfield National Historic Site. I know a little bit about the library and its history with the Garfields. I have never heard that story before.
Isn't that interesting? I know.
The thoroughness of your research is outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was, I mean, it's so fun I like researching. I like stories and finding out new things, but it's fun when you find something out like that, because I feel like people think back then, you see the photos where it's very, I don't know, maybe more serious, or it appears to be that way, but they had fun. They had just different kinds of fun than what we have today.
Now, you wrote your first books as Christmas presents when you were 9, right?
I did. Yeah, I've always loved writing. I really can't remember a time that I haven't been writing in some form, like writing in a journal or writing stories. And when I was a kid, I remember writing on, computer paper and illustrating books that I gave as Christmas presents to my parents and my grandparents. And I was very proud. And I know they exist somewhere. I'm sure my parents still have them, but I'll just try to track them down. Yes, first edition.
Do you remember what any of those books were about?
I do. I remember my mom telling me as a kid that she remembered going downtown and going to the Terminal Tower and going shopping, and how, that was a big deal to go down there and to see the amazing, this was at Christmas, and seeing the amazing window displays. And I just kind of fictionalized it and made it into a story about going downtown and experiencing all of that. And then I think the other one was about taking a train. I know she used to take a train to visit family in Youngstown. So I think that was the other one. It has been a while though.
There's picture book material here. That Terminal Tower one, that's...
Yeah, maybe.
So we have reached the lightning round, which is where I ask you questions that don't have something to do with hidden history of Lake County. Now, you worked as a PA on The Best Thing I Ever Ate, correct?
I did, yes.
What is the best thing you have ever eaten?
Oh my gosh. This is hard. The best thing I have ever eaten. That's hard. And I mean, we're lucky in the area we live in. There's so many amazing restaurants. I'm just thinking this because this is where we're going later today because it's a beautiful beach day. But I have to say that one of the best milkshakes is definitely at Scooters. Gotta say that.
Can't go wrong with Scooters.
No, I'm an ice cream fan. So, but yeah, I don't know. That's tough. I would just keep listing.
Lightning round continues. How did you end up in the film Unstoppable?
I ended up in the film Unstoppable because I had just come back to Northeast Ohio after being a reporter in Toledo. And I'm signed with the agency in downtown Cleveland, and over the years have done various projects like commercials and industrial videos, and they knew that Tony Scott was looking for someone who had been a reporter to play a reporter. So it was really good timing for me. And I auditioned at my agency, and then I got called back and I went to Pittsburgh and I actually auditioned for Tony Scott, which was intimidating, but he was just so nice. He was just so down to earth. And then I got picked to be a reporter, and I knew that I would have lines, but there were no lines written. So I went out to State College and I was there for about a week, and it was just this unbelievable experience. Here I was reporter number 3, so not a big part, but I had a trailer, I had a stand-in. Tony Scott wanted to make sure that I wasn't too cold and I had an extra coat to put over my coat. So he was really great to work with, especially considering I had never been in a movie before. But I ended up, he kind of lets you ad lib a little bit. And I think that's part of the reason he liked having people in the movie who had experience in these different roles, because he figured if you were a reporter, then you could think about what a reporter might say. So yeah, some of the lines are actually ad libbed and of course approved by Mr. Scott, but it was a lot of fun.
So knocking on wood, hopefully we are coming to the end of the pandemic.
Yes.
What are you most looking forward to doing, either yourself or with your family, in a post-pandemic world?
Traveling again. During the pandemic, we've actually grown a new appreciation for the Lake Metroparks. We've always loved them, but we've spent so much time outdoors and going to the parks. So that part has been nice, but we definitely miss going to new locations and traveling around, and so many of the places that have been closed down during the pandemic. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and being able to get back to normal, hopefully, and go explore again.
Do you guys have a favorite Metropark?
No, we kind of just bop around and switch between them. I suppose we've been going. We like Chapin. We like Far Park members. Penitentiary Glen has the great play areas. We've got 3 kids, so we veer to the ones that have not just paths, but some kind of a play area and playground too.
And nature play is phenomenal.
Yes.
My kids were ecstatic when the animals went back on display. They're on a first name basis with that fox.
I know, they love the fox and they love the eagle too. They're a big fan. And I'm excited, in Environmental Learning Center. I just did a program there with my daughter the other day, and they've got a great outdoor play area that I think is supposed to be ready soon. So that'll be one of our next stops.
Who are you reading right now?
It's The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. And it's about the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. And it's pretty gritty. It's interesting, but it's definitely, I wouldn't say the part I am in is super uplifting, but I hear that it has a nice ending, and it kind of gives you a new perspective on what we've experienced over this past year with the pandemic. It's a good book.
Final question. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I want to add how much the libraries have meant to me. I grew up in Willowick, so, the Willowick Library is the library I grew up going to, but as I become an adult, I've enjoyed going to many of the libraries in Lake County and love to take my kids there too. But I think it really encouraged me, having my parents take me there as a kid and leaving with stacks of books. It made me a reader, and that in turn made me want to write and to be able to recreate some of the stories that I saw in these books. So I owe a lot to the library system here in Lake County for encouraging me to become a writer.